That's right, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you're zoning in and tuning in because this is one of my favorite songs. So we just gonna have to let it rock for just a second. You may be in your car, you may be cleaning your house, you may be cooking. Somebody recently told me they listened to 2 or 3 episodes as they were cooking a meal for their family. Wherever you are, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for leaning in. Because this whole idea is about connecting with others. And that leads me to a new thing that we're trying, this question of the month. So this episode is going to be called Question of the Month. And I'm just going to pose a question for you to think about and hopefully ponder on with the people that you know so that it can create more opportunities for insight as we continue to do our best work in this field, in this profession of ours that we love so much. So the question of the month is this: do you identify as an introvert or an extrovert? And does it matter? Here are my thoughts on that. Someone asked me this question not too long ago, and just as I was about to answer, I hesitated. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I'm really either one. As a matter of fact, I responded, I feel like I'm an introvert in an extrovert's profession. So let me explain what I mean by that. I've been in higher education for about 17 years now, really my whole career. And in almost every role that I've had, I've always had to come across as an extroverted person. And I think it really started out in my youth, being a part of the church. And essentially, when you grow up the way I did, you don't have a choice but to be an extrovert. I played the drums. I was a youth minister I was on the youth council. And then, of course, there's the Easter speech. Some of y'all know about Easter speeches. You don't have a choice but to get up there and be an extrovert in those moments and times. That led to me using that as a practice throughout my time as a student leader, and always found myself in spaces where I was leading the charge or facilitating a meeting or running for a leadership position. And then when I started my career in higher ed, I found myself in positions that were more student facing, which means that in order for that to be effective, I really had to be extroverted at times. And so that's taking students on trips, leading large groups, thinking about training and developing things that cause people to pull the best out of themselves. But as my career grew and I grew as a person, I realized that extroversion, right? That what it takes, the energy it takes to be an extrovert really took a lot out of me. And sometimes, in some cases, it was exhausting. But I built my career on it. And so it was hard to go into an introverted space and stay there and be comfortable there when ultimately my extroversion, my extroverted nature is what was building my career. And so I moved from eventually student-facing roles into human resources, which is more of an employee-facing role. And as a result of that, I moved to a different place in the campus that had a different office culture. It wasn't near the student center where a lot of the action was. And so I realized that this environment was really comfortable for me. As a matter of fact, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the solitude. I remember being in the student center at a certain point in time and the students were really loud. And I felt like I was getting frustrated and like I wanted to go out and tell them to calm down, quiet down, to shut my door. And then one day it hit me that these are the same students that have been here the entire time. And they've always been this loud. Maybe it wasn't them. Maybe it was me. Okay, maybe they could have calmed the volume down a little bit, but maybe it was really me. And I was outgrowing that space. And as I moved into a different role that required a different way of me to approach my job, I became comfortable, almost too comfortable with the solitude, with leaning into the introversion. My job now doesn't always require me to be out front. The majority of the time, I have to be locked into meetings, locked into the office, doing data analysis, looking at policy and procedure, kind of getting at the nuts and bolts of the systems that govern our institution. And I really, really like that work. But I realize now that maybe perhaps I've always had introverted qualities, but I've just never been in the spaces where they could be of maximum use to me. And so my question for you, the question of the month is, do you identify as an introvert or an extrovert? Does it matter to the work that you do, or does it even matter at all? Personally, I believe it's more fluid than it is factual, meaning perhaps these aren't traits that we should be assigning ourselves or assigning to others, but we need to think about the spaces that we're in at the time and how we can use either of those, whether it's introversion or extroversion, to our advantage to show up as our authentic selves in the spaces where we may need to be. For example, I've been in spaces where I was an extrovert when I clearly could have been a bit more introverted. I should have fallen back. I should have let somebody else speak or have a turn to talk, or I should have had an opportunity to hear and listen rather than always give the answer. But I've also been in places where I was introverted at a time where I probably could have spoken up more. I could have shown up a little better. Maybe I showed up for a presentation and mailed it in when I really could have given it more time and energy and met the expectations of those who hired me to be there. I don't know, but I do know what it's like to feel like you're in between both. And I'm starting to become more comfortable with that level of fluidity. So I encourage you to think about this question, discuss it with others, put it on a staff meeting agenda as a topic. But think about the ways in which you show up in your space, in your sphere of influence, and then whether or not the introverted version of you or the extroverted version of you is working to your advantage. But how does it make others feel as well? I know it's easy to say, I don't care what others think, but that doesn't work in the work that we do and in the profession that we're in. We have to care. We have to be mindful. Maybe you shouldn't care so much that it dictates everything that you do. But if you don't care at all, that can be dangerous. And it can also impact how you show up in spaces where your presence matters. So give that some thought. I'd love for you to comment on any one of our social media platforms. I'd love for you to email me directly. Or if we never meet and you have a conversation with someone, at least you've been able to do that and engage in some way. But that's the question. Give us some thought. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening and take care.